Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Benson, a certified financial planner with CCMI, and part of my specialty has been helping people through life-changing events because there tends to be a lot going on in addition to the financial considerations. Many of the clients I serve have experienced a life-changing event, such as losing a loved one, a difficult prognosis, changing careers, or even retirement. With everything we are dealing with today, and because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, we wanted to share this conversation with you on the topic of decision-making in times of uncertainty, or perhaps at a time when you have too much going on and may not be at your best. I'm excited to have Susan Bradley with me today. She is also a CFP, and she is the founder of the Sudden Money Institute. She has focused her career to better serve financial planning clients by developing processes and tools for the personal side of money and for clients going through transitions. I first heard about Susan through Peg Eddy, one of our founding partners, and my path has crossed with Susan's since I'm now in the process of becoming a certified financial transitionist, otherwise known as a CEFT, which is a level up designation from the CFP and is a designation created by Susan's organization. So Susan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kim. It's great to be with you. And it's great to be with Peg Eddy's firm, the legacy of Peg and her husband, one of the original fee-only financial planning firms out there. And that kind of shapes the way the firm would be growing and evolving with such a strong start. And some people would ask about the CFP designation, and everybody knows that that's a pretty strong designation, and your firm is, you have partners and advisors with all kinds of really important certification and education. And I'm delighted, and I think Peg would be too, to see that you're specializing in working with clients in transition. So we have the designation that you have now, the CEFT, because I think the public deserves to know that there's more to working your way through a life transition event with a guide that has not only the technical background, but with the transition awareness and the tools and the ongoing education. It's something that we need when we need it. And those life events are the times when we shape our lives by decisions. So it's an expertise on the technical side, but as you said, it's also an expertise on the personal side. So we all need a guide when we're going through these events so we make the best possible decisions.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit more about common types of transitions and the types of decisions being made and why you felt a need to focus your work in this area?
Yeah, there are transitions that actually, even the word transition, I don't think in our culture we really understand it. It's a very natural thing. Transitions are those times between the way life was and the way life will be. Transition and change, that shift from the way point A was to point B, is a really important time. Some people call it a liminal space. There's lots of different names for it now. We think of it as life events, maybe. And you think of widowhood, divorce, maybe inheritance as kind of like the big ones that you could start to think about. But there's all kinds of subtleties to it as well. And I wrote the Sudden Money book, which led to the Institute, because I was stumped as a CFP. And when I looked around in the country back then in the mid 90s, nobody was really studying this. There was no protocol, there was no model. I was kind of out in the wilderness by myself. And I didn't want to write a book, I wanted to read a book on it. Because there was something different happening. And it turns out it's not just a legal settlement or widowhood or divorce. It's when your life fundamentally changes. It's when your life moves forward and you can't go back. And in our culture, we don't give much credence to that. we kind of think, okay, so this has happened here. Let's put the money and the cash flow and all those pieces back together. And now you're good to go. Go back on the highway of life. And it's not that. The highway of life has changed. You're on a different highway
Yeah.
and you have to learn how to do that. It's a different kind of expertise and guidance that your professionals either have or they don't have.
Mhm. Yeah, and you mentioned being on a different highway. It feels like all of us are in a transition right now, having dealt with the pandemic, and there continues to be uncertainty going forward. Can you talk a little bit more about perhaps helping those who may be in a fog right now, or maybe just feeling blah, and how we can use this time as an opportunity to perhaps reshape the future?
Yeah, yeah. It's really remarkable, and we're certainly not done with the transition. We're talking together now in May of 2021, and the pandemic is still very much with us, although it's shifted again. And when we go through change, when we human beings face change, we have a neurophysiological, psychological, sociological response to that. And we've been tracking the behaviors and traits of people in transition for over 20 years now. And that fog that you mentioned is very much a common trait. Doesn't always have to be there. It's not everyone all the time, but it's a common trait. The mental, the physical fatigue that happens, the sense of overwhelm and lack of focus. Um, and all of that, as natural as it is, it really has to confront this need, perceived or real, to make decisions that will alter life going forward.
Mhm.
So if you're feeling that it's still that fog of the transition, you're not alone. It's happening all over the world. There's a numbness that people sometimes have, and that can also be accompanied by this need to move. People frequently, we all do. I don't mean to say that it happens to everybody but me or to CEFTs. It's human. Um, there's a need sometimes to just get over it. Just any
Mhm.
decision is better than no decision. Just move forward, and that's when some mistakes can really get made that are hard to or expensive to unwind. So
Mhm.
it's a time to pay attention, be careful with your decision making, know how to pause, respond to something rather than react, and have someone help you kind of stress test the ideas, stress test the scenarios, because sometimes it's really hard to see, and that's what a fog is. It's not that you're lost, but you could get lost if you keep wandering around in the fog. You may end up someplace that you don't want to be. So
Yeah.
you want a guide who's been there and can keep you safe while you're moving through this.
Yeah. Yep, that's great. So I'm about halfway through the curriculum, the core class, and I'm learning a great deal of new information. I've already started to use some of the tools and have made differences in clients' lives already. Can you talk a little bit about some of the tools that are available to CEFTs?
Yeah. What we're talking about today, Kim, is we're trying to figure out it's nice to talk about the potential when life changes to create something else, but it's really helpful to have structure, and that's what the tools do. And they're not, it's not like a check the box kind of exercise, and no one told us we needed a toolbox. These have all been developed through real life experience, really since the mid 90s, since I started on this journey, this thing to figure it out. There's always more to learn, but things like, and I know that you do this with your clients, you actually help people identify and then articulate what works best for them in a meeting. What makes you comfortable and productive in a meeting? We all have different ways of being comfortable and productive in these critical meetings. But really, Kim, for now, we've used that tool for 20 years. Um, we hear over and over and over again people say, wow, no one ever asked me before.
Mhm.
I didn't really know until I looked. And you don't just ask a question, as you know. We help people have a structure. So we have preferences to look at and think about and a conversation to have. And then before you know it, your most important person in your financial life knows how to help you be your best when you're in these situations.
Mhm.
Sorting and prioritizing decisions into simple now, soon, and later
Mhm.
categories was one of the first things that I figured out. I was a CFP for a long time. In 1995 is when we started this, and I could see that people in these events were making bad decisions frequently. So how do you help people make better decisions? And I come from the financial literacy movement, which is probably how Peg and I first met each other, but it wasn't financial literacy, it's transition literacy. So we have to keep things really simple and relevant for the individual that we're working with. So they're not general tools. These are real these are tools that have been validated by science over the years. We didn't design them to be neuropsych tools or mindset reset tools or mindfulness. It turns out they just do that. Um, and it wasn't just one or two. We ended up with there's about 36 different tools, and every single one of them comes from real life experience where advisors have kind of gotten stumped by something more than once, and we have to step back and say, "Well, what really could we do differently and test it out?" So what you're going to have, and you already have, is not just tools, but the skill to use the tools, the listening capacity to really be heart to heart and eyeball to eyeball with your
Mhm.
clients at really important times.
Definitely. And that's one thing Peg taught me as well is I remember oftentimes she would talk about the importance of listening and not only listening to what is said, but what's not said and body language and things like that. So that's
Yeah.
definitely important.
It's so amazing that that is not built into the CFP training or the CFA or CMA or any of the other ones. It's always acknowledged that it's important, and communication is always shows up as being a critical component, but no one tells you how.
Mhm.
And even as
That's
kids, are you taught how to really listen? You
yeah.
listen to me. I'm telling you to do this. That there's that listening.
Right.
Um, and no one really taught us how to do change, and life is all about change. So, a part of being a guide, a thinking partner to a client in transition is knowing how to be really present. It's a mindfulness experience. We actually have mindfulness woven into our training. We have side courses in it, but mindfulness is an important part.
Yep. And I will say I have used the now, soon, and later tool. And that really helps empower clients, especially those who are overwhelmed and they just don't
Yeah.
know where to start. So you can at least bucket things in these categories so that they can know what takes priority and what other things can be set aside for now. So they're not paralyzed, not knowing what to do next. And it empowers them to start moving forward.
The neuropsych people tell us that what happens in separating things into what are really urgent, and if you don't deal with it now, there are consequences you don't want. And then the soon things, which are important but not urgent. And then the later things, which are important to the client, but you just can't deal with it yet. You need more time and information and so on. By doing that, it creates a calm mind. And what that means is a release of the anxiety in the amygdala and a shift in brainwave activity. Now, if someone had told us back then, create something that changes the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, I wouldn't have a clue what to do. But we just did it logically in a human way. And then they told us, oh, this does that.
Mhm.
And that's what you do feel a relief. And I use that decision free zone we're talking about. I use that on myself all the time when I'm overwhelmed. It just works.
Mhm. Definitely. And I think one thing you said that resonates with me is the word thinking, or the words thinking partner,
Mm.
because oftentimes just talking with clients and just talking about what's going on in their lives to someone they trust who can be objective and fully listen to what they're saying. I had a client tell me the other day that she was embarrassed because she had a lot of credit card debt due to retail therapy during the pandemic, and she was embarrassed to tell anybody about it. So it wasn't until our conversation where we laid things out, and we didn't only talk about the financial aspects of things, but also her well-being and her family. She hadn't seen her daughter in a long time, so let's talk about what that next get together looks like. So I've
Yeah.
seen firsthand how great these tools have been.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you for doing that kind of work. We're really we're helping people manage their well-being.
Mhm.
And we know you can have a lot of money and not have well-being, and you can have well-being and not have a lot of money. But when life is shifting and changing, and that pandemic, this pandemic, I'd love to have it past tense it, but can't do that yet, has filtered into all of our lives. No one can say it no big deal. It's a big
Right.
deal. And it shows up and it should be honored. And the fact that you can help somebody work through something like that in a way that they feel safe. It's not
Mhm.
just safe from other people, it's safe with their own judgment of
Mhm.
themselves and the misery that that can cause. I mean,
Mhm.
that's not on a CFP exam,
Right.
but it's right there in front of you with a client sometimes.
For sure. All right, well, I was going to go ahead and wrap this up. Did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share?
I'm very hopeful that the world is starting to pay attention to transitions and things like pandemic fatigue. We call it transition fatigue. I think it'll be 2 or 3 more years before we look back and we can really understand the stages we went through. But I
Mhm.
think there is a new awareness of this experience, and we're all figuring out how we can do the next, not pandemic, but the next time our life changes. We hopefully are all learning life skills, and you're the one who can work with your clients, remember who they are when they forget themselves, and help them reestablish that capacity and the confidence to reshape life each time it changes. So I think overall we may be in a great learning shift, and the world should be a better place as a result.
For sure. That's great. Thank you, Susan. And I agree, while the numbers are important, I think the conversations with clients that they remember the most are the personal ones. And
Mhm.
those are usually what keeps them up at night.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I
Thank you for
appreciate
the
it.
beautiful work you're doing. It's nice to be with you today.
Yeah, it was a privilege and honor to have you. And I want to thank our listeners for taking time out of their day as well. I always appreciate Susan's insight, and
Thank
have a
you.
great day.
Be well, everyone.